What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to Steve's Random Stuff and for another episode of what's going on in the garage. Hey, I am out here today getting my tackle ready, my rods ready for this coming Saturday's club tournament at Lake Sonoma. I thought I'd take a little time here to share with you my shaky head setup, something I throw pretty much year round. I always have it tied on. I have one dedicated rod pretty much to use for shaky heads year round, and shaky heads work just about everywhere. It's not just a light tackle technique, but you can get into some of the Magnum shaky heads and stuff. But we're not going to get into those today. It's kind of a whole different setup. But I'll go over kind of head to toe my shaky head setup, rod, reel, tackle, even some of the secret baits or special baits that I like to use. Again, these are year-round techniques that I use, and whether it's fishing Lake Sonoma, fishing Berryessa, Clear Lake, Shasta, anywhere. So, like I said, it's not just a small fish technique. I've caught fish up to 8 pounds on the shaky head rig, and so let's kind of go over that. My rod of choice is this G-Loomis IMX-Pro. It's a 763S SJR. It's a 6'6" rod. It's a medium heavy action, but it's got a fast tip. So it's got pretty good fast tip on it. I really like using the medium heavy action rod for shaky heads, because when you're fishing around gravel and rocks and such, and that bait gets down there on the bottom, and sometimes it'll just kind of get hung up in the rocks or kind of get down the cracks. And with the medium heavy action rod, you can kind of snap that rod really quick and get that bait off of the rocks. In comparison, this is my 703 Dobbins champion rod. It's a medium action rod. It's got a lot, I don't know if you can see that, a lot softer tip. And I've tried different rods over the years, and the medium action rods are just a little too soft, and you end up being hung up down on the rocks. You just can't snap that bait out of the rocks, and you spend more time kind of getting frustrated, getting snagged and stuff. So medium heavy action rod is kind of the way to go for shaky heads, fish around rocks, fish around docks, trees. A lot of times I just flip this bait around the trees and stuff. With these smaller heads, I can cast them a mile, but a lot of times, especially at like Lake Sonoma or Clear Lake, I'm flipping these around the docks. I can also, with the 6'6" rod, I can skip that bait under docks, get it back in there in the shade. Especially in the summertime, it's a really good technique to be able to skip that bait under the rocks and get it back to where those fish are hiding in the shade. I have that paired up with a Daiwa Tatula 3000 series reel. I like the Tatulas a lot. They're really smooth drags, but they also have a 6.2 gear ratio compared to a lot of your spinner rods that are down in that 5.1 to say 5.3 or even 5.4 gear ratio. So it's a faster gear ratio, good drag system on them. As far as line, I use Powerpro 15-pound braid on all my spinning rods, regardless of what technique I'm using, and I pair that up with a Seaguar fluorocarbon leader. Most of the time I'm using 10-pound, but I will drop down to 8-pound line if I'm fishing open water like Berryessa or Shasta, and even sometimes at Clear Lake. Like in the wintertime, those fish are a little bit more lethargic. You can get away with 8-pound line, fish it out in front of the docks and such. And I've caught bass, like I said, up to 8 pounds on the 8-pound line with this same technique. I have that tied together with the FG knot from the fluorocarbon to the braid. I really like this knot. I'm tying these when I'm at home in the garage. It takes a little bit longer to tie, but they're really small. It comes to the guys really great. Usually if I'm on the water and I break a leader or something like that, I'll use like an Alberto knot or something else like that to do it really quick. My leaders are pretty long. These are 12, even 15 feet long. You can see my bait's here and the knot's right here. So it's a good 12 feet long right now. I'll retie this, and I'll probably put a little longer leader because when I'm fishing around trees and stuff and cover, the line gets kind of scuffed up and you got to retie fairly often. So I like the longer leader. It gives me ample room to retie throughout the day without having to redo a new leader. Getting down to the jig heads. I found over the years I've tried, like I said, a lot of different baits, and I really like the stand-up style of jig heads with the corkscrew. And I talk about corkscrews. I don't like, if you can see these ones, these really small corkscrews. They're really hard to get the bait on these really tiny corkscrews like that. My number one kind of go-to, and I use these for years, is the good old spot remover. 3/16 ounce, 1/4 ounce most of the time. I usually start with a 3/16 pretty much year round unless I'm going to be fishing deep. I want to keep this bait on the bottom and feel the bottom, feel the rocks, feel the, you know, whatever you're dragging it through. If I'm not feeling the bottom very well because of the wind, I'll bump up to a 1/4 ounce. And that's about as heavy as I go most of the time, especially with the spinning rod. But the spot remover, you know, it stands up really well. It's got a good hook on it, and it keeps the bait on there really well. Another one that I've been using a lot, another stand-up head. This one is made by Mega Strike. It's a little different style of head, but again, it stands up really well. It's got a good corkscrew on there. These come in anywhere from 1/8 ounce. You can get them all the way up to 1 ounce if you're going Magnum. And actually, something I kind of just really learned is that not only do they have the corkscrew on here, is they also have this ribbed. If you want to rig your bait with an exposed hook, you can just push that bait on there on the bottom and go with an exposed hook. So that's something I just kind of recently learned. Another head here is this one's just got a regular keeper. You can see that. Now the trick with rigging something like this is most people, when they put on their worm, is they'll go straight in. So straight in the bait like this. And what happens is that bait's kind of does something like this. It's kind of hard to show, but without putting it on there, the bait does something like this. So the trick with putting on this style of hook without, you know, with the regular barb keeper on the back, is to go in your bait at an angle, kind of from the front corner down at an angle instead of going through the nose. That way when you bring that bait down, and I'll push that on here, your bait, you can see that is at an angle. I get that up over the barb, and that way when you set it up, boom, it's a lot straighter than if it's halfway down the shank. And again, you got better hookup ratio. You don't have all that plastic going down the shank of the hook, and it keeps that bait, when it's up like there, it keeps that bait up in the air. So that's a trick for rigging these kinds of hooks without the wire keeper. Other keepers I've tried is this little push on type of keeper. These are okay if you're throwing like a smaller worm, but the problem is once you catch a fish or two, the worm just rips out of there, and the worms just don't hold up very well on these kinds of heads. So I try to stay away from these unless I want to, for some reason, need to throw a smaller worm. All right, so that's the rod, that's the reel, that's the line, that's the jig heads. Now let's get into some of the plastics that I use, some of my favorite worms that I use throughout the year. Yeah, and colors will really kind of vary based on watercolor and time of year and, you know, clarity and daytime, nighttime. So I'm not going to really get into colors. But some of my favorite worms, we'll start off with this one. Here's you can't go wrong with a Robo Worm. Robo Worms kind of, you know, they've been around forever. You can go, you can fish them anywhere. Good action, good plastics. They hold up pretty well. But what I like to do, especially with the corkscrew type head, is I'll go with the fat Robo Worm and not the skinny ones, because the skinny ones don't go on the corkscrew very well. They tend to be about the same diameter as the worm, so, or the corkscrew. So I like the fat worms, and what I'll do for that is I'll pinch off just the very tip of the worm, just like a 1/16 of an inch, just that rounded piece. I'll pinch that little tip of it off. Makes it a lot easier to screw that onto the bait. Doesn't really affect anything else. So Robo Worm, probably one of the best baits out there to throw on a shaky head. Next one here, this is a Biospawn plasma tail. Again, very good plastic. It's got this really soft tail, little different shape, so when that bait stands up, it's got a lot of action. It's got kind of a bigger tip on the end, and so this stands up and works really well. Another great bait. Next bait here, this is another Biospawn. This is the Biospawn Exo Stick. Green pumpkin, of course. You can't never go wrong with green pumpkin. This bait's actually kind of cool. It's kind of like a Senko style bait. It's 5 inches. It's got a skinny, you rig it, typically you'd rig it nose down with the rounded, and the skinny back end piece makes that thing stand up, and with the thicker end, it really kind of has a lot of thump to it. And sometimes what I'll do is I actually rig it backwards. If you want a little less action, I'll rig it upside down, and then this top end is a little thicker, so you get a little less action for that. So, or if your bait gets torn up, just flip it over and fish it the other way around. Great bait, fished it. All right, so Exo Stick, great bait, a little bulkier profile than the worms, and works really well. A little more action than it's using like a plain Senko or something like that. Now I'll get into a couple of my specialty baits. Some of my favorites that I've been using for quite a while. Unfortunately, these baits have been discontinued by Yamamoto. And I'm going to say these are Gary Yamamoto baits because the new Yamamoto company discontinued these. These are the 6.75 Slim Pro Senko. This is it's just called a 6.75 long Pro Senko. Dynamite bait for shaky head, and it's got a good thick lower body, and that tail is just comes up to a point. And dynamite bait on the shaky head. It's got a ton of action. That thing just kind of whips around. You can probably still find some of these online, so, at places, but they're getting harder to find. But dynamite bait, they do make this in a 5 inch, but it's just too small. It's a skinnier body. It's they're good probably for drop shotting, but I don't really like using them for shaky head. But the 6.75s, I'll use them until I can't get them anymore, and or until I run out. I got a big double bag here of these baits in the green pumpkin, purple, and copper. Great color. For Senko's, great colors for any Yamamoto bait. So that's the Pro Senko. The other bait that I really love, and this has kind of been one of my go-to baits over the years, and they used to make this in a ton of colors. Then they kind of dropped it down to like 5 colors, and then and now they just discontinued it altogether. And the bait I'm talking about is the Yamamoto, Gary Yamamoto. This is called the Stretch 40 Grub. Dynamite bait. This is the cinnamon black flake. This is one that got discontinued as far as colors early on, like several years ago. I managed to find a bunch of them online and bought several packs at that time. Green pumpkin. You never, like I said, never go wrong with green pumpkin. This is just a great bait on these shaky heads. As far as head colors, I'll usually pair this up with a green pumpkin head. But man, for smallmouth, for spotted bass, berryessa, man, those fish just eat this up. I think this is actually the bait that I caught that 8-pounder on at Clear Lake was this bait, except I had it in a solid black at the time, and that's again one of the colors I can't get anymore. But if you can find them, you can, like I said, you can still find those out there online at some stores. Great bait. I found some, I think, just recently for like $5 a pack, maybe Tackle Warehouse and such. Stretch 40 Grub by Gary Yamamoto. Again, as far as the jig heads go, like I said, my two favorites are the spot remover and the Mega Strike jig head. Now I just looked on Tackle Warehouse today actually, and there are close to 150 different shaky head jig heads available on their website. It's crazy. Then you add in the different sizes and colors, and you got thousands of different shaky heads available. Like I said, I've tried several different baits, and I've always come back to these ones. Tried and true, they work really good, and it's time to restock on some of these as well. So 3/16 for the most part, like I said. Quarter ounce if you cannot feel on the bottom, or if you're going deeper, go to jump up to a quarter. And I think that should about do it. Any questions, shoot me a comment down below. I'll put a lot of this stuff into the description below as well. If you have other shaky head jig heads that you prefer, let me know. I'll try them out, see what's out there. But like I said, definitely go with the larger corkscrew type of baits. And then real quick before we close out here, big shout out to my friend Dominic down in Southern California. He's been ripping up the kayak series down there. And check out his channel, Double Digit Angler on YouTube, putting out a lot of good content as well. If you like the information, hit that like and subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Build the channel, and we'll catch you guys all out on the water. Take care.